My name is Emily Carter, and at 23, I thought I understood what happiness felt like. Tonight was supposed to be proof, my college graduation, a milestone I'd fought for every single day since my mother died. The ballroom was glowing under crystal chandeliers, filled with the hum of conversation, bursts of laughter, and the clinking of champagne flutes. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music weaving through the air like silk. Aunt Grace hugged me so tightly my ribs ached, her perfume, a mix of lavender and something warm, wrapping around me like home. Lena, my best friend since freshman year, darted through the crowd with her phone, snapping candid pictures of me mid-laugh, mid-toast, mid-proud grin. She kept saying, "You did it, Em," and I'd answer with a laugh. But inside, I was still a little girl hoping my father would look at me with genuine pride. Richard Carter, my father, stood at the far end of the room, speaking to a man in a sharp navy suit. Even from here, I could see the stiffness in his posture, the way his eyes flicked across the room without ever really seeing me. He'd paid for this party, of course. Nothing less than perfection when it came to appearances. But our relationship had always been complicated. He raised me in the technical sense, but Aunt Grace was the one who made sure my hair was braided for school, and my birthday cake had the right number of candles. The music swelled as the servers brought out the cake, its tiers frosted in white and decorated with sugar roses. Lena placed the cake knife in my hand, her smile bright. As I leaned over to cut the first slice, my father appeared at my side. For a moment I thought just maybe he'd congratulate me. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in, his voice low, almost drowned out by applause from across the room. "After this party," he said, each word clipped and deliberate, "pack your stuff." The words hit like a splash of ice water down my spine. I blinked, unsure I'd heard him right. "What?" I whispered, but he was already pulling back, turning toward another guest with a polite chuckle, as if we'd just shared some inside joke. The champagne glass in my hand suddenly felt heavy. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. All around me, people clapped, cameras flashed. Someone shouted for me to smile. So I did, my lips curving into a picture-perfect expression while my mind spun. What did he mean? Why now? I had done everything right. I'd worked hard, never caused trouble, made him proud, or so I thought. As the crowd closed in, offering hugs and congratulations, I felt the edges of my perfect night start to crack, beneath the warm lights and the sound of celebration. My father's words echoed, heavy and cold, and in that moment, I knew this night wasn't the ending of one chapter. It was the beginning of a storm I couldn't yet see. I slipped upstairs, weaving through clusters of laughing guests until I reached the quiet of my bedroom. The muffled thump of music bled through the floor, but in here, the air was still. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the smile drop from my face. My fingers gripped the edge of my dresser, as if holding on could stop the room from tilting. "Pack your stuff." The words replayed, sharp and cold, in the voice I'd known all my life. I began pacing, the heels of my shoes clicking against the hardwood, my heartbeat loud in my ears. I didn't even notice the door open until Aunt Grace stepped inside, her face soft with concern. "Emily," she said, closing the door behind her. "What's going on? You look like you saw a ghost." I stopped pacing and met her eyes. "Dad just told me to pack my stuff. After the party." Something flickered across her face, not shock, but recognition. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't about you, Emily. It's about him." "What does that mean?" I asked, stepping closer. But she shook her head, her gaze sliding away. "I can't. Not right now." The words stung. Grace had been my anchor for as long as I could remember, the one person I thought would always give me the truth. Before I could press her again, the door burst open and Lena stumbled in, a burst of champagne-fueled energy. "There you are," she said, tossing herself onto my bed. "Everyone's looking for you." What's with the secret meeting? I hesitated. Then, because I couldn't keep it in any longer, I told her. Word for word. Lena sat up, frowning. "That's insane. You're just supposed to leave? No explanation?" "Apparently not," I said bitterly. Lena's eyes narrowed in that way that meant she was already plotting. "Then don't just sit here waiting for answers. Go get them." Her words struck something in me, a spark under all the confusion and hurt. I remembered a business card I'd tucked into my desk drawer years ago. a contact from my first internship, a man who had once leaned across his desk and said, "If you ever need help, I'm just a call away." I pulled open the drawer and dug past pens, receipts, and old photos until my fingers closed around the worn card. The number was still there, printed in neat black ink. Grace watched me, her brow furrowed. "Emily, what are you doing?" I met her gaze, feeling the first pulse of resolve. Taking control, I dialed, pressing the phone to my ear. On the second ring, a voice answered, low, familiar. "Hello?" I glanced toward the door, lowering my voice. "I think it's time we talk. Tonight." I used to believe my childhood was stitched together from warm colors. The golden light in my mother's kitchen, the smell of cinnamon tea steeping on rainy afternoons, the way she hummed softly while folding my sweaters. Back then, the space my father left in the house felt less like an absence and more like an unopened door. I didn't know enough to miss him. The day that warmth vanished still plays like a film in my mind. I was 8. A police officer stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hat brim, his mouth forming words my ears refused. My mother's favorite scarf hung on the coat rack, still smelling faintly of her perfume, as if she might return to claim it. She never did. Aunt Grace arrived 2 days later, her voice steady, her eyes red. She held me tightly, whispering that she would take care of me. But before she could, Richard stepped in, a man I'd seen only in framed photographs, always smiling like the camera owed him something. He was my father by blood, though it never felt like it. He didn't take me in for love. He took me in because people were watching. Under his roof, my life became a performance. Private school uniforms pressed within an inch of their lives. Friends handpicked for their parents' names, not their kindness. Weekend lessons in piano, tennis, and etiquette, because those were the skills that opened doors. My world was curated for cocktail party conversation, not for me. Even then I noticed the cracks. Late at night, voices from down the hall. Grace's sharp, urgent tone, Richard's clipped retorts. Once, I heard him say I was a liability. The word landed in my chest like a stone. I never asked what he meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Now, years later, I sat at Grace's kitchen table. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and something darker, a kind of heaviness in the air. She poured tea into my cup but didn't meet my eyes. "Emily," she said, her voice low, "you need to be careful." Careful about what? My fingers curled around the warm porcelain, grounding me. About the questions you're asking. She finally looked at me, and her gaze was full of something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or regret. If you dig too deep, you might find things you can't unsee. Things that change how you remember everything. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "You make it sound like a crime novel." She didn't laugh. "Sometimes families hide things worse than any crime novel." Her words pressed against me, heavy as lead. I wanted to demand answers, to force her to spill whatever it was she was holding back. But instead, I sipped my tea and felt the bitter aftertaste coat my tongue. In the silence that followed, a thought settled in my mind, cold and certain. Whatever Richard had done, it wasn't new, and I wasn't the first. The music from the living room thumped through the floor, a muffled heartbeat that didn't match my own. I spotted Richard near the bar, his glass half full, his expression unreadable. I didn't give myself time to think, just cut through the small crowd until I was beside him. "We need to talk," I said, low enough that the others wouldn't hear. He turned, surprise flickering before the usual composure slid back into place. "Emily, what did you mean earlier?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "About what's coming?" For a moment, his jaw tightened as if the words were trapped behind his teeth. Then he shook his head. "Not here. We'll talk later." Later when? But before I could press, his phone buzzed in his hand. The vibration was sharp, insistent. He glanced down, and the name that flashed across the screen wasn't one I recognized. A woman's name. Elegant, foreign-sounding. Something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, guilt. He hit the side button, dimming the screen, and slipped the phone into his pocket. "Excuse me," he murmured. No explanation, no apology. Just a half smile that didn't reach his eyes before he turned and walked away, threading through the crowd toward the French doors. I stood there rooted, my chest tight. That was interesting. Lena's voice came from behind me. She'd appeared like she always did, quiet, unnoticed until she was right there. "You saw?" Of course I saw. That name—" She leaned in, lowering her voice even further. "You think it has something to do with why he's acting so cagey?" I wanted to tell her no, that it was probably work, a harmless friend, anything. But the truth lodged in my throat. "I don't know," I said finally. "But it's not nothing." Lena gave me that knowing look, the one that felt like she could see every thought I was trying to hide. If it was me, I'd find out who she is before sunrise. My eyes tracked Richard through the glass doors. He was outside now, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. The cold night air misted around him with each exhale. He glanced back once, just once, toward the house, toward me. The look wasn't accidental. It was measuring. I hated the way it made my skin prickle, the way my mind started running in spirals. If he thought I'd just wait until he decided to explain, he didn't know me well enough. I finished my drink, the ice clicking against the glass like a clock ticking down. Tonight, I'd get my answers, one way or another. The cafe smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt espresso, a mix that clung to the air like a secret. I spotted Noah at a corner table, hoodie pulled low over his brow, eyes flicking to the door every few seconds. He'd always been like that, hyper-aware, like the world was a puzzle only he could see. I slid into the seat across from him, the scrape of the chair loud in the hushed space. "You're late," he said, not unkindly. His voice was low, just above a whisper. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. I didn't mean it as a joke, but the corner of his mouth twitched anyway. "All right, Emily, tell me everything." The warmth from my coffee seeped into my hands, grounding me as I spoke. I told him about Richard, about the whispers I'd overheard, the documents I wasn't supposed to see, and the gnawing suspicion that my father wasn't the man I thought he was. Noah didn't interrupt. His gaze stayed steady, sharp, like he was memorizing every word. When I finally stopped, my throat dry, he leaned back. "You want me to dig into your father's life? Financial records, personal files, the works?" I nodded. "Yes." His fingers drummed lightly against the table. "Emily, if I do this, I can't unsee what I find. And neither can you. Are you ready for that?" The question hung between us, heavier than the smell of coffee. I thought of my childhood, the way my father's laughter filled the house, how he'd rest a hand on my shoulder before big exams, how I used to think he could fix anything. But lately, every memory came with a shadow I couldn't ignore. "I need to know," I said finally. Noah's gaze softened, but there was no relief in it. "Then I'll do it. But I have to warn you, Emily, sometimes the truth doesn't just hurt. It changes you." A flicker of unease coiled in my stomach. This was it, the moment I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. For the first time, I wasn't following my father's rules. I was breaking them. He pulled out a small notebook and jotted a few things down. "I'll start with his recent transactions, then move to any offshore accounts. If there's something buried, I'll find it." My pulse quickened. "How long will it take?" "Depends on how well he's covered his tracks." He looked at me then. Really looked, as if measuring my resolve. "Emily, are you sure you want the truth?" The answer came without hesitation. "I'm done living in the dark." For a moment, silence pressed in, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine. Noah slid the notebook into his bag, stood, and adjusted his hoodie. "All right," he said. "Then we're in this together." As I watched him walk away, the relief I expected didn't come. Instead, a chill threaded through me, cold and certain. Because I knew, whatever he found, nothing would ever be the same. The smell of sesame noodles clung to my apartment like a guilty secret. Lena sat cross-legged on my couch, carton balanced on her knee, chopsticks dancing as she talked. "I'm telling you, Em, something's off," she said, noodles dangling midair. "Maybe Richard's broke. Like, not just a little broke, the kind where you start selling off your grandmother's pearls on eBay." I snorted, nearly choking on a dumpling. "Richard broke? He drives a car worth more than my building. Which is exactly why it's suspicious." She leaned forward, eyes bright with conspiracy. "Or maybe he's got someone on the side. Someone expensive, the kind who wears silk to bed and calls you darling with an accent." I laughed. I had to, but the sound felt too thin, too forced. Every possibility she tossed out landed somewhere I didn't want to look. Lena wasn't done. "Or," she said, lowering her voice as if the walls had ears, "he's in something illegal. White-collar crime, maybe. Money laundering. Oh, human organ trafficking. Organ trafficking? I stared at her, horrified. She grinned. Too much Netflix. But you see my point. Secrets leave traces. I wanted to tell her she was being ridiculous, that Richard's life was neat and explainable. But the truth was, her words stirred a quiet unease I couldn't quite push down. A knock rattled my door. When I opened it, Aunt Grace stood there, cheeks pink from the wind, carrying a paper bag that smelled faintly of her lavender hand cream. I was in the neighborhood, she said, stepping inside before I could answer. We shuffled plates and cartons to make room for her on the couch. Lena picked up her thread midair. So, Grace, what do you think? Could Richard be hiding something? Grace smiled faintly, settling her bag on the coffee table. Men hide things all the time. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes it's not. Like affairs? Lena asked, half teasing, half baiting. For a moment, Grace didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to her lap, hands folding neatly, the silence stretching until it was too noticeable to ignore. When she finally looked up, her smile was still there, but it didn't reach her eyes. Some things, she said softly, aren't worth knowing. We moved on, or pretended to, talking about nothing and everything until Lena left with a hug that smelled of soy sauce. Grace stayed a while longer, sipping tea, speaking of neighbors and weather, careful not to circle back. But later, lying in bed with my journal propped on my knees, I replayed that pause, that flicker in her face. Grace's eyes said yes, but her mouth stayed shut. The words looked small on the page, but the space they opened in my mind was vast, and in it, something dangerous waited. The phone rang at 11:42 p.m. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Noah? My voice was hushed, like the darkness outside might overhear. I found something, he said. No greeting, no hesitation. Just those 3 words, tight with urgency. You're sitting down, right? My pulse quickened. Just tell me. There was a faint hum on the line, like the connection itself didn't want to carry what he was about to say. Richard's been sending encrypted emails to an offshore law firm in the Cayman Islands. The name alone made my skin prickle. Cayman Islands meant secrecy, money, shadows. Okay, I tried to keep my tone even, but my mind was already racing through worst-case scenarios. One of the subject lines. He paused, and I heard the sound of him swallowing. It says, regarding Emily Carter. It felt like someone had reached through the phone and squeezed my stomach into a knot. My name. It came out flat, almost a whisper. Yeah, he sent it 2 nights ago. Urgent confidential priority flags on every single one of these messages. He's careful, uses double encryption. But I managed to skim the headers. I pressed my hand to my forehead, pacing the narrow strip of carpet between my bed and the window. Outside, the street lamp cast pale circles of light that suddenly felt like interrogation spots. What could he possibly be talking to a Cayman law firm about me? That's the question. Noah's voice was low, but I caught the grit underneath. And whatever it is, he doesn't want anyone here to know. Not his firm, not the authorities. Not you. I wanted to protest. To say there must be some innocent explanation. But the truth was, Richard didn't deal in innocence. Not anymore. Noah, can you read them? Not yet. The encryption's strong, like government-level strong. But I'm close. Another day, maybe 2. He exhaled, a sound heavy with both determination and warning. Until then, you need to be careful who you trust. If he's going offshore with your name in the subject line, it's not for anything you'd want in the public record. A chill slid down my spine. You think he knows we're looking? I think, he said slowly. He's already making moves in case you find out. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. My reflection in the dark window looked pale, ghost-like. Noah? Yeah? Don't disappear on me. A soft chuckle without humor. I'm not the one you should be worried about disappearing. The line clicked dead before I could ask what he meant. I stood there in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, phone still in my hand, the words regarding Emily Carter burning into my thoughts. In that moment, I realized something. Whatever Richard was hiding, it wasn't just dangerous. It was already in motion, and I was at the center of it. The rain followed me all the way to Sophie's cottage, whispering against the hood of my coat like it knew something I didn't. The small, ivy-choked house loomed from the fog, its windows glowing faintly gold. I told myself I was here to catch up, but even I didn't believe that lie. Sophie answered the door in a pale sweater that looked 2 sizes too big, her hair pulled into a loose knot. Her eyes darted behind me as if checking whether I'd come alone. "Emily," she said, forcing a smile. "Come in before you drown out there." Inside, the warmth hit me, smelling faintly of chamomile and wood smoke. We settled in the kitchen, the clink of teacups the only sound for a while. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured. "You've been busy," she said, avoiding my gaze. I stirred my tea. "Richard's been keeping me occupied." That's when she slipped. "Yes, I've heard he's been making plans to send you away." My spoon froze mid-stir. "Excuse me?" Color drained from her face. I didn't mean— What kind of plans, Sophie?" She swallowed hard, her eyes suddenly glassy. "It's not my place." I shouldn't have said anything. I leaned forward, my pulse drumming in my ears. "You think I'm just going to let that go?" But Sophie shook her head, her gaze sliding toward the rain-blurred window. "Please, Emily, just leave it." Silence stretched between us, heavy and brittle. The tea had gone cold in my hands. When I finally stood to leave, Sophie rose too. But instead of walking me to the door, she crossed to a narrow cupboard. From the shadows, she pulled out a small, locked wooden box, the kind of thing that felt older than the hands holding it. She set it on the table between us. "This was your mother's," she said softly. "She wanted you to have it someday." I reached for it, the smooth wood strangely warm against my palms. The lock was tarnished brass, the kind that required a key I didn't have. "What's inside?" I asked. Sophie's lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't tell you. Can't or won't." Her eyes flickered with something, fear maybe. "Be careful, Emily." She said it like a benediction and a warning all at once. The box felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the weight of everything my mother never got to tell me. Sophie ushered me out into the rain without another word. By the time I reached the car, the wind had picked up, slapping my coat against my legs. I looked down at the box in my hands, the lock glinting faintly in the dim light. Richard wanted me gone. Sophie wanted me careful. And my mother had left me something locked away. Whatever was inside, I had the distinct, bone-deep feeling it was going to change everything. I set the box down on the kitchen table, its weight heavier than the wood beneath it should allow. Lena hovers behind me, hands buried in her hoodie pockets, watching like the thing might hiss and bite. The lock is small, brass dulled to a muddy green. I can see the tiny scratches along its edge, signs of a life spent rattling in some drawer or attic. My fingers are clumsy at first, the pick trembling between them, but the lock clicks open with an almost casual surrender. Inside, the smell hits me first. Dust, paper gone soft with age, and something faintly sweet, like lavender. A stack of envelopes, yellowed at the corners, is tied with twine. Beneath them, photographs. I recognize her instantly. My mother, smiling in a way I haven't seen since before she got sick. She's standing barefoot in a garden, sun slicing through her hair like molten gold. I trace her face with my fingertip, my throat tightening. Lena's voice is softer now. She leans in, picking up a picture of my mother holding a baby, me, swaddled in a blanket I still keep in my closet. "You've never shown me these." "I didn't know they existed." My voice is barely audible. Then I see it, an envelope, sealed, the paper a shade paler than the rest. In neat handwriting across the front, for Emily, when she turns 23. The room tilts, my pulse thudding in my ears. I glance at the calendar on the wall. It's August. My birthday was 3 weeks ago. "You have to open it," Lena says, eyes wide. My hands hover over it, trembling. I can't. Not yet. She frowns. "Why not?" "Because whatever's inside, I can't unread it. Once I know, I'll know. And everything might change." Lena studies me for a moment, then shrugs, but I catch the concern behind her eyes. "You're overthinking it." "Maybe," I say. But the envelope feels like it's humming in my hand, a live wire sparking against my skin. I put it back in the box and close the lid, the lock dangling loose. I carry it to my bedroom and place it on the nightstand, right where I'll see it the moment I wake. "Tomorrow," I whisper, like a promise. That night, sleep pulls me under like a tide. I'm standing in a field I don't recognize, the sky bruised with storm clouds. My mother appears in front of me, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes fierce. "Emily." she says, her voice cutting through the air. Watch who you trust. I reach for her, but she's already fading, her outline dissolving into shadow. The wind roars louder until it's the only sound, swallowing her completely. I jolt awake, breath sharp, my gaze snapping to the nightstand. The box is still there, but the lock is closed, and I didn't close it. The envelope felt heavier than it should, its paper edges worn soft from years of hiding. I broke the seal with careful fingers. Inside was a single brass key and a folded slip of paper. An address. Lena leaned over my shoulder. That's not anywhere near here. What is it? I don't know, I admitted, but my pulse had already picked up. We're going. 15 minutes later, we were in her car, headlights cutting through the damp night air. Neither of us spoke much. My mind spun with questions, each one louder than the hum of the tires. Who put this in my hands? Why now? And what could possibly be waiting for me at a random storage facility? The building was unremarkable. Rows of metal doors, each with its own lock, the smell of cold concrete and motor oil hanging in the air. The flicker of a lone street lamp made the place feel deserted. We parked, and I clutched the key in my palm, its grooves biting into my skin. It's registered under my mom's maiden name, I told Lena as we walked. Saying it out loud made my chest tighten. Unit 47. The lock clicked open with a reluctant twist. The metal door groaned as it rolled upward, revealing darkness. I stepped inside, my phone's flashlight cutting a pale beam through dust motes. Boxes, dozens of them. Some neatly stacked, others slightly collapsed. A faint scent of old paper and cedar filled the air, tugging at a memory I couldn't place. We started opening them one by one. Photographs of my mother holding me as a baby, journals in her looping handwriting, stacks of letters tied with ribbon. And then I saw it, a thick legal folder, heavier than the rest, its label faded but still legible. For Emily. My fingers hesitated on the clasp. It felt wrong to open it here, in the chill of this forgotten place. But curiosity pulled harder. Inside were legal documents, property deeds, and something wrapped in tissue paper. I unwrapped it to find a sealed envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's Emily, to be opened when you're ready. My throat tightened. The date in the corner was just 2 weeks before she died. Lena shifted beside me. Maybe we should take this somewhere safe. I nodded, my grip tightening on the letter. The weight of it felt different. Not just paper, but truth. The kind that changes everything. I turned off the flashlight and looked back at the dark unit, feeling a sudden chill crawl up my spine. My father had never mentioned this place. He'd never wanted me to find it. And now, I understood why. The letter waits on my kitchen table like a small, dangerous animal. I circle it twice with my tea, steam fogging the window where the city blurs into bruised evening. My apartment is too quiet, the kind of quiet that turns thoughts into bells. I break the seal. I expect the ink to smell like grief. Instead, it smells like paper, old dust, and the faintest trace of my mother's perfume, a ghostly citrus. Emily, she begins, her handwriting instantly familiar. I hear her voice as if she were across from me, elbows on the table, sliding a plate of sliced apples my way. If you are reading this, then I didn't get the time I wanted. The words tilt the room. I steady myself with a palm on the table and keep reading. She writes about careful plans, about money that isn't a fortune, but more than enough for a life built on my own choices. She names the account, the trustee, the law firm. Her sentences are neat but fierce. I can feel the set of her jaw in them. She says it's ironclad, at 23, full access. No earlier, no exceptions. Unless my stomach climbs into my throat. I sign any document granting control to Richard. One sentence is underlined twice. Do not sign anything that gives your father power over your finances, decisions, or guardianship. It will void what I have built for you. I read it again, as though repetition could change a story already written. She explains why. Because control had a way of dressing like love in our house, and she wanted me to have one corner of my life that was mine. The kettle clicks as it cools. The city hums below my window. Somewhere, laughter rings brittle as glass. She warns me to expect pressure, a velvet-gloved insistence. That he will be punctual when the date nears, perfectly reasonable, and that the reasonable ones are the most dangerous. She urges me to keep this letter hidden, to trust my unease like a compass. A memory knocks. Graduation night. his voice smooth as polished wood. "Pack your things. I'll have the car take you out tomorrow." The timing wasn't rage. It was strategy. Move me out before 23. Keep me dependent. Keep the pen in his hand. My chest tightens. Rage is a clean burn. This is Ash. She must have known he would try, and still she hoped I'd see through him. I press my thumb to the underlined sentence until the paper dents. At the bottom, she's written, "Whatever he says, you are not a liability. You are my daughter. Live like the world belongs to you." The room wavers. I fold the pages as if they could bruise and slip them back into the envelope. Outside, sirens thread the dark. Inside, something sharp turns toward light. Now I finally know what Richard wanted from me, and exactly what he'll do to keep it. I paced the length of my bedroom, phone pressed to my ear. The line clicked, and Noah's voice came through, low and wary. "I found something," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "The name that came up before. Turns out she's connected to a bank in the Caymans. And there's more. Transfers. Large ones." A pause. "Cayman Islands," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "Emily, that's offshore. If Richard moved money there, it's not because he wanted a vacation house." "So it's real? I'm not imagining this?" "No," he said flatly. "It could be where your funds went. Hidden, layered, hard to trace, but not impossible." The words hit like a punch, solid, undeniable. My breathing slowed, and with it, something inside me shifted. Fear had been my constant companion these past weeks. Now it was giving way to something sharper. A knock at the door broke the moment. Grace stepped in, hesitant. I didn't hang up. Noah could hear. "Grace," I said, "tell me you didn't know about any of this." Her eyes darted to the floor. "I knew some of it. The betrayal was a cold, clean slice. You knew? I thought—" She clasped her hands together, as if holding herself together. "I thought if I told you, you'd go straight to Richard. And he would have cut you off completely. No access, no leverage." "Leverage?" My voice rose. "Grace, this is my life. My future." She flinched but didn't back away. "I was trying to protect you in the only way I knew how." I let the silence stretch until it became something she had to feel, heavy and suffocating. "No," I said finally. "You were protecting yourself from his anger." "Not me." Her lips trembled, but she didn't argue. Noah's voice was still in my ear, quiet but steady. "Emily, this is bigger than just missing money. If he's gone to these lengths, he's playing for keeps." "I'm done playing," I said, more to myself than anyone else. Grace's gaze flicked up, and for the first time tonight I saw a hint of respect in it. Or maybe fear. Either would do. I grabbed my laptop from the desk and started opening files. Bank statements, emails, screenshots. Every breadcrumb I'd found. The glow of the screen painted the room in cold light. "From now on," I said, my voice low, "I keep everything. Every detail. If Richard wants a fight, he'll get one." "Emily," Noah began. "I'm not stopping until I have the truth. And I'm not doing it alone." Grace looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Who else are you bringing in?" I closed the folder on my desk and met her eyes. Anyone who hates losing as much as I do. Because this wasn't just a line in the sand. It was the first shot fired. Richard's lawyer's office smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the kind of sterile shine that promises order while hiding dust in the corners. Richard sat at the head of the mahogany table, one hand on a leather folder, the other smoothing his tie as if it could straighten our history. "Emily," he said, calm as a lake under ice. "Thank you for coming." I took the chair opposite him, leaving my coat on, like a runner who doesn't plan to stay. The lawyer, a narrow man with patient spectacles, offered a professional smile that didn't reach his pupils. "We're just sorting family matters," Richard said. "Formalities." His knuckles tapped the folder. The lawyer slid a stack of documents across the table. The paper sighed as it moved. "What are they?" I asked, letting the question float. "Declarations. Updates to trusts." "It's time to formalize your independence," the lawyer said, voice caramel over steel. "Sign where highlighted." I didn't touch the pen. "I'll need to review these with my own counsel." A pause, thin as a wire. Richard's smile porceled into something colder. "That's unnecessary. I'm your counsel in all but name." My mother's warning rang like a cracked bell. Never sign anything alone. I slid my phone face down along my thigh, pressed record, and felt the soft vibration confirm it was listening. I'll still wait, I said. The lawyer interlaced his fingers. Ms. Hale, timing is sensitive. Certain clauses expire. What clauses? My pulse climbed my throat. I skimmed the top page. Legalese fenced every field. Then I saw it. An amendment granting temporary stewardship of my assets to a designated guardian in the event of financial instability or public discord. Guardian Richard Hale. Heat gathered behind my eyes. This transfers control of my inheritance, I said, keeping my tone level, like a surgeon narrating a cut. Richard leaned back. Only as a safeguard. You've been impulsive. Choosing my own attorney isn't impulsive. His jaw moved once, a grinding hinge. Emily, you're wasting everyone's time. The lawyer nudged the pen closer. The metal nib caught the light, a small bright threat. We can have this done in 5 minutes. I'm not signing. I set the pen upright, a flag I refused to raise. Politeness evaporated. Richard's voice dropped into the register he used on board members who forgot who owned the room. You're dramatizing a routine adjustment. I read the adjustment. Color stippled his cheeks. You don't want to make an enemy out of me. The sentence clicked on my recording like a trap shutting. The lawyer murmured something about rescheduling, but the air had already turned metallic, storm-bound. I stood. My chair legs screamed against the floor. We're done here. Richard's eyes were winter. If you leave now, opportunities will close. Then let them. I walked out, heart cannoning, phone warm in my pocket, certain the door behind me hadn't closed on a meeting but opened on a war. The elevator doors parted, bright as a verdict, and someone was waiting inside. I called Mark from the hallway outside my apartment, palms damp, heartbeat ticking like a startled bird. He picked up on the second ring. The same warm baritone that had guided me through disastrous drafts and late-night crises in college. Emily, he said, and I could hear the smile. Tell me everything. I did. Richard's sudden generosity, the inheritance I barely understood. My aunt's silences felt like locked doors. As I talked, Noah leaned in the doorway, arms folded, listening. The smell of his coffee drifted out, steadying me. Mark didn't rush. When I finished, he let a moment breathe. You did the right thing calling, he said. I know an attorney who specializes in inheritance and estate protections. She's excellent, and she's not intimidated by men like Richard. The knot between my shoulders loosened. Would she see me? She'll make time. I'll text the introduction. By afternoon, Noah and I were riding an elevator to a glass-walled office high above the river. The city was burnished in late light. Windows kept the day's secrets. Inside, the reception smelled of lemon polish and paper. The attorney, Ava Patel, rose to meet us. Her handshake was cool, precise. Professor Mark speaks highly of you, she said, motioning us into a conference room where legal pads sat aligned like sober soldiers. I told the story again, this time with details I'd avoided. The threats that weren't threats, the way Richard's kindness curled at the edges like spoiled milk. Ava listened with her pen still, her gaze steady the way good bridges are. First, she said when I finished, your inheritance is substantial. She named a number that made Noah's eyebrows climb and my stomach dip. The room felt briefly weightless. Second, it is legally yours. Ironclad, unless you sign it over. Richard has no claim, not by marriage, not by proximity, not by pressure. Relief washed my skin warm. I felt taller in my chair, like my spine had remembered itself. Noah exhaled, fingers brushing mine under the table. But, Ava continued, and the air shifted. People like Richard often try routes the law doesn't sanction. Coercion, fraud, misrepresentation. They may engineer emergencies or arrange accidents of paperwork. Sometimes they come for reputation first. She slid a card toward me. From now on, he talks to me. If he contacts you, record it. Save every message. Do not meet him alone. I nodded, a small flame catching inside. So I'm safe? You are protected, she said. Safety is an ongoing decision. When we left, the river flashed pewter under a lowering sky. Wind tugged at my coat, and the city seemed newly navigable, streets resolving into a map only I could read. Mark called to check in before dinner. His faith in me was a sturdy rope. Back home, I saved Ava's number under unlikely ally. My phone buzzed. An unknown message that made the flame inside me gutter. It said, nice shield, shame about what it can't cover. The invitation arrived like a velvet noose. Family dinner. Casual. Richard even added a smiley face. Aunt Grace called to make sure I'd come, her voice brittle with cheer. I went anyway. Not because I trusted him, but because traps tell you what the hunter fears. The dining room glowed with softened lamps and polished silver. Extended cousins I hadn't seen in years lined the table like witnesses. Richard moved among them with the glide of a maître d', kissing cheeks, arranging place cards, calibrating the story before I sat down. When he reached me, he brushed my shoulder. "You look tired," he murmured, kind as a knife. Aunt Grace squeezed my hand. "We're all worried, dear." "About what?" I asked, taking my seat. The linen smelled of starch and lemon. The soup, to my left, steamed in shallow bowls we weren't allowed to touch yet. Richard cleared his throat. "About you." He lifted his glass and smiled to the room. "Emily's been under a lot of stress. She's reactive, understandably." He turned to me, palms open. I wanted transparency. The cousins nodded like metronomes. Someone muttered, "Bless her heart." He slid a folder toward me. I recognized the papers without opening them. The same coercive agreement, dressed in neutral language. "All I'm asking is that you do the right thing," he said. "Sign, and we can all move forward. No lawyers, no drama." I felt the net tightening in the gentle clink of cutlery and the hush of listening relatives. "You want quiet," I said. "I want peace," Richard replied, smooth as cream. "Your instability isn't your fault, Em, but it is hurting people." Aunt Grace's eyes shone with pity that wasn't for me. "Sweetheart, we just want you safe." I let the words pass. Then I set my phone on the table and tapped the screen. The projector I'd tucked in my bag hummed to life, casting a white square against the wall between portraits of dead ancestors. Gasps darted around the table. On the wall, email headers, dates, a firm in the Cayman Islands. Subject lines. One read, regarding Emily Carter. Richard didn't move. "This is partial evidence," I said evenly. "The rest is encrypted, but the pattern is clear. Urgent, confidential communications offshore. With my name." Aunt Grace's hand flew to her throat. A cousin whispered, "Oh my God." Richard's smile appeared. A perfect white bridge over black water. "This is a misunderstanding. Legal inquiries. Due diligence." He tilted his head, feigning concern. "Emily, you're spiraling again." "Then invite the firm to confirm," I said. "On the record." He laughed, short and sharp. "We don't air private matters." Aunt Grace's gaze flickered. "Richard?" He kept smiling, but the air around him heated. I saw it. The flare in his eyes. A pilot light turning predator. "Everyone," he said lightly, "let's not indulge theatrics. Eat. Enjoy. Emily, we can talk after." I stood, chairs scraped. "You wanted transparency," I said softly. "Consider this a courtesy." I left the soup, the folder, and the room full of curated concern, knowing the war had just begun. The knock comes after midnight, a frantic stutter that rattles the chain on my door. I'm awake already, sitting with the wooden box on my lap and the lamp burning low, as if the light could pry it open for me. Through the peephole, Aunt Grace stands there, coat collar up, eyes raw with wind and worry. "Grace?" I unhook the chain. "What's wrong?" She slips inside, bringing cold air and rain. She doesn't sit. She just stands in my kitchen, hands clasped, chest shaking with a breath she can't release. "I should have come sooner," she says. "I should have told you everything." My mouth tastes metallic. "Everything about what?" "The inheritance," she whispers, as if the walls might repeat her. "About Richard." "About all of it. The apartment seems to shrink around us." I gesture to the table. "Start at the beginning." She lowers herself into a chair with the care of someone easing onto a confession. Up close, I see how tired she is. The purpling under her eyes, the chewed cuticles. She pulls a keyring from her pocket, then a tiny silver drive taped to the inside of a loyalty card. The tape peels with a soft rip. "I've known for years," she says. "Your mother's will named you outright. Richard knew too, and he's been trying to divert things. Shell companies. Dummy boards. He thought if you were discredited, or conveniently absent, the assets would consolidate under him." My pulse kicks. "And you said nothing." Tears rim her lashes but don't fall. I was protecting you, watching, moving pieces he couldn't see. If he suspected I was helping, he'd come for me. And then for you. Protecting me by keeping me blind, I say. Grace flinches. I deserve that. She slides the flash drive across the table. It clicks against the wood. Financials, emails, transfers. Everything I could scrape without setting off alarms. It's time you know everything. I stare at the sliver of metal, ridiculous and heavy. My mother's locked box sits beside it like a heart that forgot how to beat. I think of Sophie's warning, of Richard's smile that never reached his eyes. What are you afraid of? I ask. She laughs once brittle. Richard doesn't fight fair. He hires people who don't write their names down. I'm afraid of doors left ajar. I'm afraid of cars that idle too long. The lamp buzzes. Outside, a siren smears through the rain. I take Grace's hand. It's colder than the drive. Why now? Because he's accelerating, she says. And because I can't carry this alone anymore. Gratitude and betrayal surge through me. I needed you, I say. I'm here, she answers. And for the first time, I believe her. I pocket the drive. The apartment feels watched. Then stay, I say. Lock the door. She nods, but her gaze snags on the window, and I follow it to headlights idling at the curb, unblinking, patient. Noah kills the overhead light, leaving the room midnight blue except for the laptop's glow. I balance the tiny flash drive in my palm like a shard of fate. He nods. I push it in. Folders bloom. Vendors, consulting, family trust, and a bland personal that feels like a dare. My pulse ticks in my throat. Noah's fingers move fast, cracking through directories, dragging files into a secure mirror so nothing gets altered. The first PDFs are contracts, polished at first glance, until you scroll. Buried addendums, duplicate signatures, wire instructions that jump countries mid-sentence. Look at the routing, Noah murmurs. Domestic front, offshore backdoor. Classic wash. I click an email chain labeled estate planning. Urgent. Richard to a lawyer with a smile made of punctuation. As discussed, the beneficiary will sign. I'll manage deployment through my entities. My stomach sours. Another message. Adjust the language so the trustee can approve early reallocations. The draft has my name floating like a paper boat in a storm. Noah opens a spreadsheet titled Bridge Investments. Columns grin with fake certainty. Vendor numbers, purchase orders, amounts that don't match. Hidden accounts, he says, highlighting cells tied to a bank I've never heard of. Numbered. Balances are way too clean. We drill deeper. A subfolder called Port Red. Inside, scanned passports. Men he used as signers. Wire confirmations stack like receipts. One jumps out. 2 weeks ago, 7 digits swept to Zurich. Another, a transfer-marked education fund landing in a Cayman holding. My breath snags. He's already moving it. Some of it, Noah says. Not all. But if he realizes this drive is gone, he'll torch everything. I can hear Richard's voice, warm as a sales pitch, promising stewardship while he unspools the rope. We keep going. A memo to a board member. The trust creates inefficiencies. Streamlining requires managerial discretion. An org chart with arrows pointing from my inheritance to a ring of shell companies named for birds. Egret Holdings, Kestrel LP, Nightjar Advisors. Predators, everyone. Noah sits back. This is enough to bury him. Regulatory, criminal, unless he scrubs, I say. He's fast. He'll pull servers, close accounts, claim the originals were falsified. Then we move now. Imaging, timestamps, escrow. Get it to someone who can freeze the assets before he blinks. Heat crawls up my neck. Who? Noah names an investigator with a reputation for teeth. But once we expose this, Richard will know it's you. No walking it back. The laptop fan whirs louder, an anxious mouth breathing. I stare at my mother's name in those drafts, reduced to initials like an inconvenience. I think of birthdays that smelled like vanilla, the envelopes she left behind, meant to protect me. I nod. We do it. An email pings the inbox, unread from Richard. Subject, dinner tonight. My thumb hovers over reply as footsteps creak outside the door. The rooftop terrace smelled like citrus and money, polished glasses, expensive cologne, and a skyline glittering like it was on my side. The post-graduation networking event hummed with curated congratulations. Partners from top firms angled toward donors. Donors angled toward cameras. I threaded through sequined dresses and tailored suits until I saw him. Richard Carter stood at the center of a small constellation. He held court like a statesman, one hand in his pocket, the other conducting laughter. When he spotted me, his smile barely tightened. I thought of the storage unit, the letters, the flash drive. I thought of my mother's handwriting warning me to be ready. "Emily," he said, smooth as the marble bar behind him. "Enjoying the evening?" "Immensely." I let my gaze drift to the men beside him. 2 judges, a hospital trustee, a partner from Richard Carter. "It's always nice to meet people who appreciate structure." A judge chuckled. "Structure is civilization." "Speaking of structure," I said, turning back to my father, "you'd be amazed how many shell companies a single empire can balance, if the accounts are layered correctly." I let the words float, light as confetti, designed for anyone within earshot to catch. The trustee leaned in. "Shell companies?" Richard's smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. Emily has been reading thrillers again. "Not fiction," I said gently. "Cayman filings, private correspondence, funds earmarked for someone else." I tilted my head. "You know, structural integrity. If a single pin is pulled, the whole design collapses." The partner's laughter faltered. "What are we talking about here?" "My daughter is joking," Richard replied. "Forgive her. Graduation euphoria." I lifted my glass. "To euphoria, and to transparency." I took a slow sip, letting silence crease the glossy surface of conversation. Across the terrace, someone began a toast, the clink of silver on crystal punctuating the moment. Richard excused us with a practiced nod and steered me away from the knot of men toward a hedge lined with fairy lights. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, aligning the record. The lights reflected in the window behind him, splitting his reflection into shards. "You kept telling me to grow up." "I have." "You have no idea what you're stepping into." His voice dropped, all velvet stripped away. "This is not a game you can win." "Then why are your hands shaking?" I asked softly. He glanced down, cursed under his breath, hid his fingers in his pocket. "Walk this back, now. Or what? Or you will regret it." I leaned in so close I could see the fatigue threaded through his irises. "I already regret letting you define my choices." I let the next words land lightly, like a match brushing dry tinder. "Regulators love patterns. Judges love receipts." Something cold slid across his face. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Fear had finally breached the surface. I stepped away, smile polite, posture perfect. As I rejoined the cluster of partners, someone asked where my father had gone. "Downstairs," I said. "To make a call." I set my empty glass on the bar and felt the night tilt. Good. Let him run, because the next move would not be his. Noah called just after midnight, his voice low, wired with urgency. "Someone's feeding Richard your moves," he said. "He knew about the bank visit before you went. He knew about Grace." The syllables rattled through me like coins in a jar. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the refrigerator's soft lungs and the distant siren dragging its tail across the city. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I brewed coffee and set the trap. I typed a decoy text to Noah about meeting a new attorney at 6, at a bakery across town I hadn't visited in years. Then I left my phone face down, screen unlocked, next to the fruit bowl where Lena always tossed her keys. I opened the window so the air carried our morning sounds. The traffic hush, the hissing kettle, the scrape of a mug. Into the hallway. Lena arrived late, smelling like rain and lilac shampoo. "You look wrecked," she said, nudging my shoulder. Her smile tried for casual. It never reached her eyes. "I was up," I said. "Thinking." She drifted toward the counter, toward my phone. "Want me to make eggs?" "Sure," I said, turning away, letting metal clatter. In the reflection on the dark microwave door, I watched her thumb my screen awake. A pause, the faintest exhale. Her shoulders pinched, then loosened, like a decision made. She turned to the sink, phone already sliding back to its spot, angelic as a paperweight. I excused myself to the bedroom, pretending to take a call. 10 minutes later, Noah texted. "Richard just booked a driver to that bakery for $5.50. Proof ugly and clean." When I returned, Lena was plating toast, too cheerful. "You'll feel better after you eat," she said. "How much did he pay you?" I asked. The knife went still in her hand. She didn't look up. "What?" to tell him where I'd be, who I was seeing, how much. She set the knife down carefully, as if the counter might bruise. "Emily, please." "How much?" I said, because I needed the number to give shape to the whole. Her swallow was loud as a door shutting. He only cleared my loans. She glanced up then, eyes slick. All of them. They were drowning me. My chest caved like a kicked box. "So you sold me for 0 interest." "It wasn't like that," she said, voice fraying. "He said he just wanted to keep you safe. If I flagged anything risky for who?" My laugh scraped my throat. "I thought I could filter it, protect you. I never told him everything." "You told him enough." The room smelled of scorched bread and betrayal. "Get out. Please," she whispered. "There was never an us, Lena." She packed in silence, keys chiming like a little funeral as she left. If my best friend was a blade in my ribs, how many knives were still waiting in the dark? The suite smelled of polished wood and winter citrus, a luxury meant to soften edges I planned to sharpen. I chose the chair opposite the window so the city glitter would frame me like a verdict. Richard arrived late, a habitual insult disguised as charm. His smile lacquered, cufflinks flashing contempt with each step. "Private enough?" he said, scanning the room. As promised. My voice was steady, deadly. Just us. He sat, half-turned to the skyline, as if the world existed to admire him. "You called me, Emily. I assume you've come to apologize for your theatrics." "I came for clarity." He laughed softly. "About what? Your trust? Your future? Those are my concerns, not yours." The adjoining door looked seamless, harmless. Behind it, microphones waited. My attorney's last message still hummed in my mind. "We'll be listening." I poured sparkling water into 2 glasses. "Tell me about the account you opened the year after my mother died." His eyes flicked almost imperceptibly. "Which account?" "The one that required a passport you never used again," I said. "Cayman Islands. Shells inside shells." He lifted his glass but didn't drink. "You always had a flair for fantasy." "Fantasy doesn't leave wire transfers," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "The papers were bait, printed proof, some real, some not. Nor does it explain why my inheritance vanished into a company that doesn't exist." He inhaled sharply. "Your mother's estate was complicated. Complicated into your pocket." His mask cracked. "You think you can manage any of this without me? You were a child with a fortune and no discipline. I preserved it. You preserved control." He leaned forward, voice low. "Fine. I moved the funds offshore, clean, efficient, untouchable. And when the time was right, they'd return, under my guidance, ensuring you didn't squander what you never earned." The words landed like nails in wet wood. "Say that again," I said, softer. "I protected what was mine to steward," he said. "I instructed Marisol to coordinate the transfers. I signed the authorizations. I structured the trusts, so you couldn't touch a cent without me." A shadow slid under the adjoining door. My heart steadied. "So the inheritance belongs to me until I decide otherwise." His smile was a blade. "You're the beneficiary of my competence." The door burst inward. Officers flooded the suite. Dark jackets, clipped commands, the cold click of consequence filling the air. Richard rocked back, shock bleaching his face. A badge rose between us like a sunrise without warmth. "Richard Hale," the lead said. "You're under arrest." He looked at me, betrayal scrambling for a perch. "You wired me." I stood, palms flat to stop the tremor. "No," I said. "You wired yourself." Steel found his wrists. His gaze darted for exits, for allies, for the invisible crown that once floated above his head. It wasn't there, and what came next was already knocking. The day after my father was led away in cuffs, the city woke up with our name in its mouth. Reporters lined the front gate like gulls on a seawall, their microphones sharp as beaks, shouting questions that pecked at every battered part of me. Cameras blinked. Tires hissed. Somewhere across town, a news chopper chopped the blue into ribbons. Aunt Grace looped her arm through mine and guided me past the windows. "Don't look," she said, voice steady as a metronome. She wore her silver hair pinned back, kitchen apron still dusted with flour, as if normalcy could be baked from sugar and heat. I wasn't going to, I lied. Inside, the phones rang like alarms that never ceased. Emails stacked like snowdrifts. By noon, 3 board members had withdrawn their support, and a supplier paused shipments, pending clarification. My father's empire, polished to a mirror for decades, fogged over in a single morning breath. Grace brewed tea, the way she had when I was 7 and scared of storms. "Sip," she said, placing the mug in my hands. Steam curled into my face, smelling of chamomile and orange peel. Tried to drink, but the cup trembled against my teeth. "I should feel relief," I said. "Instead, I'm hollow." "Hollow is space-making room," she said. "Let it." The doorbell rang. Grace stiffened. "I'll get it." Lena slipped in from the porch like a shadow that had lost its source of light. Her lipstick was gone, her eyes red-rimmed, an apology already collapsing on her lips. Emily. She didn't reach for me. Smart. I didn't know how deep it went. "You thought loyalty was silence," I said, hearing the edge in my voice. "Or profit." Her face crumpled. "I was wrong. I'm so sorry." She looked small in the foyer, smaller than any version of her I'd ever known. "You have every right to hate me." Grace hovered near the kitchen, guardian and witness. I steadied myself on the banister's cool wood and tried to breathe around the heat in my throat. "Hate is easy," I said at last. "Trust is not." I swallowed. "I need time." Lena nodded like a verdict had been handed down. "I'll wait," she whispered. "Whatever you need." She pressed a folded letter into my palm, the paper warm from her hand, and slipped back through the door to the chorus of shutters outside. Evening fell with the slow weight of damp wool. Grace made soup and turned off the television when headlines grew vicious. She stayed until the reporters' voices softened to static, until the house was night, and we were 2 islands in it. "You don't have to be brave every minute," she said at the door. "Just the next one." When she left, the quiet surged. I carried my journal to the desk by the window and opened to a clean page. The ink bled smooth as a confession. Sometimes family is the greatest threat, and sometimes the greatest protection. I stopped writing because the porch boards creaked, soft, deliberate, like someone remembering where not to step. By the time I reached Ava's office, the sky had the scrubbed blue of something rinsed clean. The glass doors sighed as I stepped through. Citrus polish, warm printer ink, and a whisper of coffee rose toward me like a benediction. Ava met me in the hall, tablet tucked against her hip, eyes bright. "Ready to sign the last of it?" she asked. "Yes," I said, surprised by my own steadiness. In the conference room, papers were stacked in measured towers. My name gleamed on the top page, crisp as a bell tone. Ava walked me through each clause. A patient lantern in legal dark, beneficiary designations, spendthrift provisions, multi-factor authentication for every portal. A trust custodian with a spine of steel. "These instruments," she said, tapping a paragraph, "make the assets functionally untouchable. No third-party claims, no marital access, no cyber skimming. You'd have to willingly hand someone the keys." "I won't," I said, and believed it. Ink scribed my name again and again. With each signature, something unlatched inside me, a rusted clasp giving way. When the final page slid free beneath my pen, Ava exhaled softly, almost a laugh. "That's it. The funds are safe. If Richard tries anything, he'll be boxing smoke." The late sun threw a warm bar across the table. For a heartbeat, I sobbed without crying, breath catching, chest light. Ava reached, squeezed my hand. Human. Uncomplicated. We celebrated with coffee that tasted faintly of caramel. I texted Noah a photo of the folder. He sent back fireworks and a cascade of exclamation points. On the way home, the city seemed to nod as I passed. A busker changing songs, a florist misting roses, a child counting hopscotch squares out loud. In my apartment, quiet spread like a fresh coat of paint. I opened a new notebook and began mapping the next version of myself. First, travel. My mother's postcards still hung above my desk, corners curled. I traced the faded ink, Lisbon, Kyoto, Valparaiso, and promised to stand in those streets, tasting their air, letting their languages rest on my tongue. Second, a scholarship in her name. Small at first, but steady. Books for girls who wrote in the margins. Third, invest in my own work. A small studio, mornings carved out like sanctuaries, my novel uncurling from fear. I set up the accounts, scheduled transfers to the trust, bookmarked the foundation paperwork. Click by click, my life clicked back. Dusk gathered. The first star winked like a password accepted. My laptop chimed. An email appeared, sender hidden behind a disposable address. No greeting, no signature. Only one line, centered like a headline. He's not done yet. The room tilted. Ava's warning threaded through my ribs. Safety is an ongoing decision. I closed the laptop gently. My peace held, fragile, luminous, yet something scratched at the edges, testing the lock. The park was nearly empty when I arrived. Morning mist clung to the grass, turning every blade into a silver thread. This had been my mother's favorite place, an oasis of green tucked between the city's relentless streets. She used to sit on the weathered bench by the pond, the one where ducks gathered like gossiping old friends. I claimed it now. The letter waited in my lap, a blank page trembling in the breeze. I uncapped my pen and began. Mom, I told her everything. The betrayal. How Richard's lies had wrapped around me like chains, heavy and invisible. The fight, the dinners turned ambushes, the whispered threats, the way every room he entered seemed to shrink. And finally the victory, how I'd dragged his secrets into the light until even his smile couldn't hold. Ink flowed as my throat tightened. You warned me. I didn't listen. But I heard you in the quiet when I needed courage. You taught me to run toward the truth even when it cut. I'm free now, Mom. I'll live on my own terms. I promise. I paused, letting the words settle on the paper. A single leaf drifted down, landing on the page like a signature. I left it there. From my bag, I pulled the manila envelope, the last of it. Contracts, forged signatures, the ledger I'd found in the storage unit. They'd been the threads Richard used to pull me where he wanted. Now they were just paper. At the edge of the pond, I knelt and struck a match. The flame bloomed, small but fierce, and I fed it the first sheet. It curled in on itself, blackening to ash. Page by page, I fed the fire until the smoke rose in twisting ribbons, drifting into the pale sky. It smelled of scorched ink and endings. I imagined my mother watching, her hands clasped, her expression unreadable until the last ember faded. The documents were gone. So was the last tether to his control. I sat back on the bench, breathing in the crisp air. The pond reflected a slice of blue now, as if the day had decided to clear for me. I folded the letter, tucking it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't ready to let it go, not yet. Some words deserved to stay close until you found the right place to leave them. The quiet wrapped around me, soft and complete. I closed my eyes, letting it sink into my bones. Then from somewhere behind me, a twig snapped. It was small, barely more than a whisper, but it sliced through the calm like a warning. My eyes opened, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. Still, the air felt different, charged. I slipped the letter deeper into my pocket, my fingers brushing the warm fabric. If someone had followed me here, they'd find nothing left to take. Nothing but me. 1 year can change everything. This morning, I woke to the sound of gulls over the harbor. My bedroom window, thrown wide to let in the salt air, framed a sky so clear it looked freshly polished. I made coffee the way I like it, strong, with a hint of cardamom, and drank. It barefoot on the porch, watching the tide pull back from the rocks. No one tells me where to be anymore. No one tells me who to be. The little house sits on a cliffside road in a fishing town where everyone knows my name. But no one knows my past unless I choose to tell them. It smells faintly of cedar and lemon oil, the way a place does when it's truly yours. I painted the walls myself, chose every book on the shelves, every photograph on the mantel. The life here is stitched together from moments I decided were worth keeping. In the past year, I've crossed oceans. I spent spring in Morocco, tracing the edges of bright-tiled courtyards. Summer in Iceland, chasing midnight sun along black sand beaches. Autumn in Kyoto, where temple bells marked the passing of hours so gently I barely noticed the days slipping by. Every trip reminded me of what freedom feels like. The thrill of making my own itinerary. The quiet joy of sitting in a place where no one expects anything from me. But the work I'm proudest of isn't stamped in my passport. I mentor young women, some just stepping out from under controlling hands, others already running toward their own lives. We meet in coffee shops, over video calls, sometimes on long walks along this very shoreline. I tell them what I wish someone had told me sooner. You are not defined by who tried to cage you. You are defined by the choices you make once the door swings open. The nights are still sometimes uneasy. I'll wake from a dream of locked rooms or the echo of his voice. But now, when I switch on the lamp and breathe in the air of my own room, the fear dissolves. I am here. He is not. A year ago, I couldn't imagine this kind of peace. Back then, I thought survival meant winning. Now I understand it's more than that. It's claiming the right to live without looking over your shoulder. It's daring to want more than just safety. It's building a life so firmly your own that no one can dismantle it. I've learned that closure isn't something you find. It's something you create. Mine came quietly, not with courtroom victories or shouted confrontations, but with the simple daily act of choosing myself. And in those choices, I found a strength deeper than any battle I fought with him. I've been writing this down in a journal, just for me, the same way I've been mapping my travels. Tonight, as the sun drops into the sea and paints the water in gold, I close the cover on this year's chapter. I didn't just survive him, I beat him. And this is only the beginning.